What's up, students? Professor Calderon here. Hope all is well, and hope you're progressing pretty good through the chapters. This is chapter 11, section 11, week 11, sorry. And I'm talking about Nazism and after Nazi Germany. So, the audio and visual machinery played a big role in the National Socialist design for living. There were radical attempts to dominate the physical world, right? But Adolf Hitler and his minister of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, they were aware of film's ability to mobilize emotions and immobilize minds. They knew that they had to create powerful illusions to captivate the audience. So immediately after assuming power, the National Socialists purged of once international recognized industry of its artistic vanguard, and the greater portion of its professional craft and technical expertise. More than 1,500 filmmakers, many of them were Jews as well as progressives and independents, would flee Germany, and they were replaced in many instances by politically subservient hacks and second-rate proponents in the minds of its most severe detractors. So Goebbels, he set out to reform German film from the ground up. And the new film renounced the sins of what's called Weimar Systemizeg, and it's art for art's sake. Intellectual liberalism and commercial pandering. It should not emanate from political life and find its way in the deepest recessions of German spirit. In his early programmatic deliberations, he mixed natural and martial metaphors, speaking of film as a body and a territorial surface, declaring himself the physician whose surgery would exorcise an afflicted organism of harmful alien elements. So there's this movement towards shaping minds and hearts and emotions. And he says, Goebbels stresses how film should exercise a discernible effect, how it must act on the hearts and minds. Its calling should be that of a popular art, an art that simultaneously serves the state's purpose and fulfills personal needs. Political ideas were to assume aesthetic and an effective force. Nazi cinema took form as a site of transformation, and art and technology implemented to engineer emotions, to create a new man and to recreate woman in the service of the new order and the new man. So they're really looking at film and acknowledging its power to shape the emotion, the hearts. And they're calling upon this to shape a new emotion, to create a new man and recreate a new woman who is servient to the Reich, the Nazism. Nazi fantasy production, I'm on page 375. Nazi fantasy productions left little room for independent movement, seeking to occupy and control all territory, both physical and psychic, in an effort to eradicate alternity. So they didn't want any alternative versions of reality. So they were seeking to creatively control this. Nazi cinema was not just a product of a ministry of fear. It was more than anything a ministry of cheer and emotion. The customary tropes of the uncanny and horrendous do not accurately characterize the vast majority of the epoch's film. Light and frothy entertainment set up in urban surroundings and cozy circles, places where one never sees swastika or hears Sieg Heil. So they were not reflecting the horrors, the murder that was going on. They were looking more like a nostalgic view of Nazism, something that be cheered in their own sense of nationalism. Goebbels sought to imbue mass culture with cultic values, to aestheticize the political in order to anesthetize the populace. All films he was fond of, saying, are political, and most especially those which claim to be his. So there's this drive to sort of anesthetize, to numb the public to what was going on. Now, during this time, American cinema, the reviewers in the Third Reich often saw popular German films in terms of propaganda ministry dreams. Among the Hollywood successes, nobody's films figured as strongly as those as Walt Disney. Who would have imagined? Right? Goebbels presented Hitler with a how to say it. He just writes here, this is a quote from Goebbels. I presented the Fuhrer with 30 of the best films from the last 4 years and 18 Mickey Mouse films for Christmas. Goebbels noted that in his diary, 20th of December, quote, he is very pleased. Disney cartoons raise pure eminence in artistic illusion to transcendent heights. Mickey Mouse films characterized and claimed a critic assessment. Claimed a critic assessing the German film's crisis in late 1934. The Mickey Mouse films are the best films without political content, sublime embodiments of films which could not be more different from Potemkin. So they're looking at Disney in this realm of fantasy and how it's pure entertainment. And they want that to raise this sort of political aesthetic and embodiment, this fantasy. German studios created realms of illusions which, on the surface, reflected little of everyday reality. By and large, soundstage productions with little location shooting, these films preferred a seemingly timeless present or a stylized period setting. Weimar's galvanizing mix of fantastic reverie and realistic exploration vanished in great measure in a cinema that provided space over time, composition over editing, design over movement. So they're looking at this aesthetic, and it's really changing what Nazism is holding up as the German aesthetic of film. National Socialism recognized that the war involved both material territories and immaterial fields of perception. Film ultimately became a weapon. This is important. Film ultimately became a weapon, an explosive arsenal of surprises and effects which made minds reel and emotions surrender under a constant barrage of stimulation. So they understood the power of cinema, all right, of film, to change minds, to immobilize and mobilize thoughts for or against whatever their political agenda was. I'm going to move on to the post-war years on page 381. After the Nazi surrender in May of 1948, foreign troops occupied a decimated Reich, and American films swiftly went about re-establishing their dominance on the European market. Goebbels' policy and Allied interventions in equal measure would bear responsibility for the sorry state of post-war German film culture, its undeniably local and limited character. On 3 separate occasions in the post-war period, German filmmakers declared their intentions to create a new German film. So the result of this was they created a cottage industry in Germany, 1/5 of whose entire production consisted of sentimental homeland films. A second initiative came at the end of 1950s from the group DOC 59, which was a gathering of documentary filmmakers, composers, and film critic Eno Patales, and urged closer connections to the international art scene. Quote, they wish to merge documentary and fiction to commingle authenticity and script narrative. Okay, so they're looking to sort of reassert a dominance in German cinema. Okay. Moving on to the East Central European before the Second World War. I'm not going to go through every single section like they do in the book. I'm just going to cover the main points on like page 383, the early days. The beginning and subsequent development of cinematography in the countries of East Central Europe share a number of common features. In what are now the Czech Republic, Slovenia, Hungary, Serbia, Croatia, and Poland, the first Lumiere film shows take place in 1896 in keen competition with entrepreneurs using the apparatus of Thomas Edison. Edison's men arrived in Prague 5 days before Eugene Dupont, the representative of the Lumiere brothers. The Lumiere cinematography was exhibited in Belgrade in 1896 and in the Austrian sector of Poland in November of that year. The other Polish cities in Poznań, Warsaw, and Lwów were already familiar with the idea of animated photographs thanks to the display of Edison's Vitascope. This initial period of film development also saw the first theoretical works of Matsuyski, the Polish photographer and film operator resident in Paris. So in the countries east of Central Europe, the first generation of people who worked with film were mainly stage hands, theatrical directors, journalists, professional photographers, and authors of popular literature. Pioneers of film production in Hungary included Mary Kurtzeff and the actors of the National Theatre. The first full-length feature film in East Central Europe were created after 1910, at the same time as in Italy and France. The period before the First War also saw the confounding of the first indigenous film production companies, most notably Anton Peck's Kinov and Max Urban's Fotokinema in Prague. A cinema network was developed, especially in the big cities where films were the most popular and accessible form of entertainment. Before 1914, over 300 permanent cinemas were in operation on Polish territory. The First World War. The advent of the First World War influenced the development of these national cinemas to an uneven extent. Both Serbia and Croatia mainly produced films reporting on military operations and shorts and middle-length propaganda. In the post-war years, at the end of the war and the collapse of multinational empires, it brought independence to the people of the East Central Europe and the creation of the nation-states in Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, influencing both the evolution of local film productions and the aesthetics of movies themselves. The dominant trends in most of these countries was towards screen adaptations of national classical literature and popular bestsellers. So they're looking at classic literature for sources of narrative and scripts. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. I'll see you guys in the next video.